You are evidently having an issue with bringing Al Dannenberg on.
Yeah, try.
Yeah.
You want me to go ahead and start or wait?
Do we wait?
Yeah, you can.
Let's wait at 1 minute and see if we can have Al show up here.
All right, all right. We could have someone sing the national anthem while we're waiting, I suppose. Maybe.
Well, John's on the phone, or I would ask him to.
Maybe Randy can do it for us.
Okay. Oh, now I see it.
Okay, so where are we at?
He's restarting his computer, I think. You want to just start with the invocation and the,
Let's-
Sure.
Let's
Why don't
start.
we start with this?
Okay, I'll call to order the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners. The date is Tuesday, April 28th. And our invocation today is by Commissioner Zylstra, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Justin Roebuck, our county clerk. So please rise and stand for the pledge. No, we're gonna have the prayer first. Sorry.
All right. Lord, bless us as we meet to discuss matters of well-being to Ottawa County residents. Impart your wisdom upon our activities so that our affairs may reach a successful and equitable conclusion. May we continue to seek your guidance, courage, and strength. Be with us in our deliberations and grant the gift of your grace and the decisions we make for the good of all those who place their trust and confidence in our leadership. Give us insight to lead with integrity, that our decisions may reflect what is right and good, and grant us the humility to always seek your will in all that we do and say. We thank you for being our source of guidance today. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yep, got it. We're all set. You bet, thanks, Jim.
Sorry about that. Mix up with the flag and the invocation. There's our Mr. Al Dannenberg. Welcome, Al.
Yeah.
Okay. Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Garcia.
Here.
Mr. Baumann.
Here.
Mr. Zylstra.
Here.
Mr. Dannenberg.
Yep.
Mr. Mefflink.
Here.
Mr. Terpstra.
Here.
Mr. Holtwer.
Here.
Mr. DeYoung.
Here.
Mr. Kyers.
Here.
Mr. Bergman.
Here.
And Mr. Fensky.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Next thing is presentation of petitions and communications.
None from us.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comments, communications from county staff. Is there anyone from the public that would like to make a comment at this time? We would like to give you this opportunity to have 3 minutes. Give us your name and address before you speak to the commission.
No hands are raised at this time.
Okay, all right. Next thing on the agenda is approval of agenda. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved. Man.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Baumann.
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Holflor,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next thing is under action and reports, consent resolutions. Mr. Fenske, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This time I'd like to make a motion to accept and approve the consent resolutions 1 through 3. Support.
It's been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Holflor,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next thing is under action items from planning and policy. Mr. DeYoung, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding amended and restated Articles of Incorporation of the Ottawa County Building Authority, I move to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the amended and restated Articles of Incorporation of the Ottawa County Building Authority.
Is there a
Support.
second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Comments or questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Do we get a little bit of discussion on Article 4, Section 2 and 3, just on composition and eligibility?
Doug?
Yep. Your question, Doug, is the validity of that section?
No, not necessarily the ability, just kind of some of the thinking behind, we're opening up the building authority from 3 to 5 members. We're adding 2 members, administrator and the treasurer. Talent improvement is not part of that, which is, that's fine, I guess. But then Section 3 says no member of the Board of Commissioners shall be on that. We did the Housing Commission. I'm on the Housing Commission, but I'm on as a resident of Ottawa County, not as a commissioner. But I'm not. There's no commissioner who's prevented from being on that board. So there's kind of some of your thinking on that.
The state law prohibits a municipality from appointing one of its legislative members to its building authority. Again, the origins of that prohibition have nothing to do with West Michigan, but on the east side of the state, there were problems with politics entering into the building authority's grant of contracts. And so the legislature stepped in and ruined it for everyone else and issued a prohibition against elected commissioners, in this case, also being on the building authority. The reasons for the expansion are that we wanted to add the treasurer as, the county's financial officer. We're going to be bonding soon, as you probably know, on the Family Justice Project. So the rationale there was it made sense to have the treasurer as one of the authority members. And then obviously, with a project as intense and complicated as the Family Justice Center, it made sense to have someone from administration on the building authority itself.
Sure.
And so the county administrator has been added. This gives us a manageable total of 5, which is also the statutory limit. And so that's the rationale and that's the legal context, Commissioner.
Okay. So there's a prohibition against commissioners, but not among other elected officials.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that, though.
Sure.
Any other questions? If not, Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. From Finance and Administration Committee, Mr. Baumann, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding court security lockdown button, I make a motion to approve the amendment to the capital improvement plan, adding a court security lockdown button.
Second.
Support.
Moved and seconded. Comments or questions?
I do have a few items to add, or a few comments to add, Mr. Chair. So when the insurance authority did approve paying for this, they approved $37,000. The day of the insurance authority meeting, we did not have the cost for all 4 court facilities, but we had a good estimate. That estimate was $37,000, and the final price to add Grand Haven to that, and actually Grand Haven is the cheapest of the 4, simply because of the pre-existing infrastructure that was already built in to that courthouse. So it ends up being $37,552.13. So we would propose getting the $552.13 out of the facilities budget. So we won't plan to bring that back to the insurance authority. So whether you amend the motion or do a friendly amendment, we'd appreciate if you would approve $37,552.13. And that will take care of all 4 court facilities. And basically what this does, this allows the security staff in the courtrooms to either shut down the courtrooms by the push of a button or by swiping a card. And currently, if a crisis happens in a building, the people who are scanning people to get in, our court security officers who are scanning folks to get in, would need to secure the facility before maybe going up 2 flights in Grand Haven, say, to deal with the situation at hand there. And this allows them simply to lock down the facility from where they're at, and then they can run upstairs and deal with what needs to be dealt with, and then come back down and open the facility once again. So we've took it to the insurance authority because we believe it does mitigate liability in the county, and they thought so as well, which is why they approved that expenditure.
Okay, Joe, do you want to amend your motion to include that additional cost? Mr. Baumann? Looks like he's locked. Who seconded the motion?
I did.
Matt, do you want to make that amendment? Can we do it that way?
Yeah.
All right, because it looks like we lost Joe. So,
I can make that amended motion.
okay. Someone want to second the amended motion?
I'll second that, Roger.
Okay, and Randy seconded it. Justin, are we okay with that?
Yeah, that works.
Okay, all right. Justin, would you call the roll then, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann, Commissioner Baumann back, Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. And because Mr. Baumann is gone, I'm wondering if Mr. Fenske would take the next item 3.
Yes. This is a capital improvement amendment to approve the amendment to the capital improvement plan, further adding James Street Building facade project.
Or,
It's been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Garcia,
yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann, Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
The motion passes.
The next item on the agenda is the community mental health personnel request. The motion is to approve the request from community mental health to add one unclassified 1.0 FTE at CMH-U3 level for a utilization management electronic data intercharge technician at a cost of $78,142.
Support.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and supported, and we've got Mr. Baumann back. So are there any comments or questions?
Sorry about that.
Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Baumann, we are on the item number 4 from Finance and Administration.
Thank you.
You bet. Mr.
Yes.
Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Number 5, Mr. Baumann?
Thank you. I apologize for that. We lost our Wi-Fi connection for a second. So regarding the Ottawa County Sewage Disposal System Refunding Bond, Series 2020, I make a motion to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the amended resolution to authorize the issuance of not to exceed $19 million in Ottawa County Sewage Disposal System Refunding Bond, Series 2020.
Can I have a second, please?
Support.
Been moved and supported. Al, would you just explain this a little bit for anyone that might be?
I'm gonna have a hard time explaining that, Roger.
Pardon?
I'm gonna have a hard time explaining that.
Okay.
The whole Dannenberg thing. So we did have,
Sorry.
we do have Pat Staskevich live as a panelist today. So Pat, why don't you go ahead and give an overview of this? And we have something blocking the screen, so I don't know if we can.
Oh, we see him now. But you know, while you're at that, maybe you could also explain the next one, or the next two, which are the Rush Creek and the Allendale Charter College, doing some similar things, correct?
Yes, that'd be
Yeah.
great. I'll
Okay,
do
so
all
if
three.
you want
in-
to just, cover all 3, please.
Perfect. So the first one is the Rush Creek, Granville, we call it the Rush Creek Collection System. That is refunding. In 2010, we did a plant expansion, and that was a 30-year bond issue. and
Yeah, thank you.
Bonds are now callable, and it looks like we could achieve over $4 million in savings. So we are hoping to refund that, and the interest rate is just over 2%. We'd save about $250,000 a year over the next 20 years. If pending your approval, we would plan to close on June 9th. So the next one is the Rush Creek Granville, and that's a new money bond issue. We have a project which is a solids handling project. It's a little over It's 19.725 million for the total project. Ottawa County communities need to cover 11.3 million of that total debt. And so that's what this bond issue would cover. The project would handle basically solids handling facilities. We would capture more of the gas that is being generated at the digester, and we'd convert that gas into electricity to further, get off of the grid, and to give the plant more options on how we handle our solids in general. So that funding is estimated to be at about 2.25% interest, $1.8 million a year. And we hope to close on August 25th, pending your approval. And then moving on to the last item, which was the Allendale wastewater treatment plant improvements. They have a 3-phase project there. And for this first phase of the project, they're going to be building an administration building that'll handle all their offices for staff, plus a new lab. That's about 7,500 square feet. They'll have a new maintenance building of about 7,000 square feet, and then they're going to renovate an existing building of about 4,800 square feet. So this project will cost $5.355 million. And then there will be 2 other phases in the $15 to $20 million range for a total project. That next phase, they're planning on doing a state revolving loan fund and not go through the county. So that's in a really quick nutshell of those 3 projects. And I do have some lengthy resolutions in front of me. So if anybody does have questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, let's go back to number 5. And are there any questions about that one? If not, Justin, would you call the roll on that, please? Number 5?
Yes, sir. Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, number 6.
Regarding the Rush Creek sanitary sewer system, the 2020 sewage disposal system improvements, I make a motion to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the resolution to approve Rush Creek sanitary sewer system 2020 sewage disposal system improvement.
Support.
So moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Regarding the Allendale Charter Township wastewater treatment system 2020 improvements, I make a motion to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the resolution to authorize the issuance of not to exceed $6 million Ottawa County wastewater treatment bonds, Allendale Charter Township 2020 improvement.
Support.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Sir, Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Regarding the 2020 Ottawa County equalized values, I make a motion to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the 2020 Ottawa County equalized values and to appoint the equalization director to represent Ottawa County at the state equalization hearing.
Support.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Regarding the receive and file the local government retirement system annual report form 5572, I make a motion to receive the local government retirement system annual report as required by Public Act 202 of 2017.
Support.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Regarding the allocation of the 2019 unassigned fund balance, I make a motion to approve the transfer of $1,292,479 of the 2019 general fund unassigned fund balance to the capital project fund.
Support.
Moved and supported. Comments or questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just a quick question about, what are some of our options here? I know I had a quick talk with Karen about this. We are taking 25% of the unassigned fund balance and putting it into the capital account. Is it possible we could allocate that to other funds?
It is possible that we could do that. And I should say that our unassigned fund balance will be 25 million. And so that we were over that amount. This brings it down to that amount. I think that as we surveyed the possible alternatives, we're probably most concerned about the capital improvement fund funding at this time. Basically, by about 2022, at this point, we're not sure how we'll fund those projects. And so it seemed to be the best place we could put that at this time. Karen, I don't know if you'd like to add anything to that?
Just one clarity, it's not 25 million, it's 25%. The unassigned, yeah.
25%. We're at the 25% and over. By allocating this amount to capital improvement fund, we get down to the 25%, which is the higher of the limit in the board newer policy or amended policy, which says the fund balance should be between 20 and 25%.
Yes.
I guess my question is, did we think of MERS, our retirement fund? Because I think that's going to get hit. And I'm wondering if we could better off put it in there and not having to come back and raise the millage.
I think that that's another analysis that we'll have to make. But I would also say that this isn't a permanent thing. It doesn't have to be. So should you decide later this fall or next year that you would rather have this money put into MERS, you can simply do that by a resolution like you are today. With the information we have today, we think this is the best place to put that money. But if we should come to a different conclusion, you can make that decision and move it.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question. Can we put money into the health fund? Is that an option?
Into which fund?
The health fund?
Health fund?
Yeah.
We have, I'm not sure exactly why we would do that, because we have nearly $2 million in that fund that we've been keeping there in the event we go back to self-insured, because there's a rundown when you leave and a run up when you go back to that. And so at this point, we don't see a need to have that in the health fund.
Okay.
That would be why.
I guess the general question is, it seems like we're taking, a relatively large amount and putting it in capital improvement when is it, the next 3, 4, 5 months, we'll definitely be short on a lot of revenue and, possibly higher on a lot of expenses. And I'm just thinking maybe not the health fund per se, but something that will make sure that our health department has a, resources to go forward the next 4 or 5 months.
Right. And I think that certainly there's money that the state's providing for the COVID response.
Okay.
There may or may not be federal money. I would also say the county does have a stabilization fund, which state law does allow a county board to set up, and the county did that, I think, back in the late 80s. And you can use it for 4 reasons once it's established, and one of those is continuance of services during an economic downturn. And so in my nearly 17 years here, we haven't tapped that fund. In fact, we've added to it, and we did budget from it twice during the Great Recession, but we ended the year better than projected and put the money right back in. So we do have kind of a backup rainy day fund, and I don't know when it's going to get more rainy than right now. So at least to take us through some short-term issues, I think we could use the stabilization fund to do that with.
And Al, just one other comment. The other is that it's 20 to 25%. So leaving it at the highest level, you still have the 5% variance there that you could choose to apply to some other fund if you needed
Good
it.
point.
Al, I wonder if this is a case where we ought to, where we should develop maybe policies or protocol on how we would use these funds in the future. Something that you would be able to determine and have the board decide priorities. So, because I can see us going all different ways as to how these dollars could be used.
I think that would be a good work session topic, to kind of talk through the policies we have for the financing tools, because I think some of that's actually in place. And then also talk about priority. I think when we look at capital improvement, one of the things Ottawa County's done very well, a few years ago, we read about a West Michigan county that didn't have the money to repair its courthouse roof. And so they had buckets, on the floor, and we don't worry about that here because of the financing tools and the way we've been able to fix things as we go. However, the capital improvement fund does not have a dedicated source of revenue, and we know there's some fixes that we need to keep up on in the coming years. And so that's why I think, we view that as a priority right now, but certainly, we do have the flexibility to change that. But I would suggest that maybe it's time to have, periodically over the years, we've done a presentation that discusses the financing tools in depth, and also what are some of the possible uses and restrictions and that type of thing. And maybe it's time to do that again in a work session, and then we can talk about some of those priorities. But I don't think anything you might do today with this is carved in stone. It's certainly something that you can be flexible with if another priority should be deemed more important.
Mr. Chair, just a question for Karen, I guess. The $625,000 transfer from the delinquent tax fund, that is going forward into the general fund, or we're still kind of just putting it in a separate pot?
The 625, you mean the 2020 budget, the budgeted amount?
We had budgeted, I think we budgeted for like the last 4 or 5 years, but we hadn't actually pulled that money from there. In our budget, we did have 625,000 set from the DTRF to go into the general fund. Do you foresee us doing that?
In the current fiscal year, pre-COVID, I would say that we traditionally have not had to use that. So we budget that from the delinquent tax fund to the general fund annually to allow, and then usually our revenues come in better and there's no need to actually make the transfer. And historically, our delinquent tax fund has funded infrastructure improvements and bond payments.
Sure. Mr. Chair, just see if we can get a kind of a tabling motion on this one, just so we can kind of maybe look at it in a work session, or have some discussions about where we all think that excess may be best suited.
Anybody want to make a motion like that? Or, you know, like Al said, we could certainly make that decision at a later date. We don't have to make that decision today. But Doug is asking for a motion to consider, from what I understand, consider making that decision at a later date. Is that correct?
Right, we can set it to the next business meeting or have a work session, and then, you know, in 4 weeks, pick it up again. It just seems like, you know, there's, you know, a difficult time right now, revenues and expense wise. And, you know, having commissioner input on what to do with that excess may be a good idea.
Anybody? If not, we're gonna vote. Phil, were you saying something?
A motion, yeah. They didn't.
I'm sorry, I just soon do it for a work session and go from there. So that's my opinion.
Okay. Justin, would you call the roll on the current motion, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Holtlor,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
No,
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Fensky,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Mr. Baumann?
Regarding the County of Ottawa financial report with Vredeveld Hefner LLC, I make a motion to receive for information the comprehensive annual financial report of the County of Ottawa for the year ended September 30, 2019.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Do we want to hear from Peter at this time?
Yes, I would highly recommend that.
Okay, Peter, you want to take us through it?
Sure.
Hopefully everyone has their report in front of them, or they have their questions, and we'll let Peter take it away.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity for being here. And I wanted to point out that your audit was conducted in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. And that results in 3 opinions being expressed, one on your financial statements on page 180. And I'm going to summarize that opinion. It's our opinion that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position, results of operations, and cash flows where applicable of the governmental activities, the business type activities, each major fund, the aggregate remaining funds, as well as the aggregate component units in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And that's in our opinion. Our opinion is on page 1, I'm sorry. But the opinion is 2 pages long. I'm not going to read the entire document to you. The opinion talks about the financial statements being the responsibility of management. It's our responsibility as independent auditors to express our opinion, and I refer to that as a clean opinion. It's at the bottom. I'm kind of paraphrasing the last paragraph on the bottom of page 1 of the financial statement. So a clean opinion, which is the best opinion you can receive. In addition to that opinion, at the very back of the report, we provide an opinion on the system of internal controls over financial reporting. And our opinion did not identify any material weaknesses, did not identify any significant deficiencies in your system of internal controls over financial reporting. So that's our second opinion, and I would refer to that as a clean opinion, or an opinion where we didn't identify any issues to bring to your attention. Our last opinion is on your compliance with federal grant requirements. You received approximately $10 million of federal financial assistance. That results in a single audit being required. We conducted the single audit of your federal financial assistance and your financial statements. Our last opinion on compliance did not identify any significant deficiencies or any material weaknesses that we would bring to your attention or the attention of the financial statement users, which also includes the Federal Audit Clearinghouse that receives a copy of your audit report. So a clean opinion on the financial statements or unqualified, our opinion on controls over financial reporting, no issues identified. Our report on compliance, no deficiencies identified. This year is the first year that we audited the community mental health operation. And we spoke with that board yesterday and walked through their compliance report, which also identified no significant deficiencies or non-compliance. So that was positive as well. You talked a little bit about the general fund balance. And so I'll leave it at that. I went into more detail with the finance committee last week. Are there any questions I can answer on the financial statements or the report? I would say also your staff is very involved in preparing the financial statements, and that's unusual. And we work very closely with your staff across the organization. So we appreciate all the efforts they put into this process as well. We really are providing the opinions. You're preparing the statements, which is quite unusual.
So any questions for Peter or for Karen at this point?
Yeah, Roger?
Yes.
As Mr. Peter Hefner mentioned, that we had our community mental health audit from our board yesterday, and it was really positive to be able to hear that there were no issues, no weaknesses. All of our grants that we do were really solid, and that we ended the 2019 year about $640,000 to the good. So even though we've heard a lot of things that are going on with other community mental health agencies, it was really good to hear that we have a real well-run CMH program and a good leader in Lynn Doyle.
Thank you,
And
Matt.
that, I have to agree with you on that one. Give credit to Keith, financial person of the mental health. I think he helped too a little bit on that. My question is for Peter, is you just said the fiscal services helped you and it was unusual. Are you saying that in a good way? I'm making an assumption. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. Very positive. Your staff has the ability to prepare their own financial statements, the notes to the financial statements, and most entities just don't have that technical expertise. So it's quite a project and a very hefty report and a substantial body of knowledge needed to prepare that document. So very positive.
Thank you.
We should also say it saves significant money for the county too, by having that ability in-house.
Any other questions for either Karen or Peter? Karen, I just want to add my kudos to you and your department for the work that you do on this. And just what Al said, the fact that you save us dollars in doing this report in-house. And so thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? If not, we'll ask Justin to call the roll. Go ahead, Justin.
All right, Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Meffelink,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvor,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Regarding the Marina Bond Notice of Intent, I make a motion to approve and authorize the board chairperson and clerk register to sign the resolution of intent or notice of intent to issue bonds for the Marina project financing.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluer,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next thing under discussion item is closed session. Mr. Garcia, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion that we move into a board entered closed session pursuant to Section 8D of the Open Meeting Act to discuss the purchase of real property.
Is there a second for that, please?
Second.
Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluer,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink, Mr. Meppelink,
Yes, sorry.
no problem, Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Chair, we have the required 2/3 vote.
Thank you.
All right, so as we talked about before, we'd ask each of you to walk out of where you're at. This will be done by phone, and the group here that will be in the closed session will move into the back boardroom and do the same.
Tell them not to leave the Zoom meeting, because then they'll can't turn off.
And please don't leave the Zoom meeting, just leave it live and walk out and then come back when we're done with the closed session.
All right, thank you.
Oh, stuff, okay.
Very large unmute button. at the top.
That one. She made it too big.
Okay, we're all back?
Pull back.
All right. Mr. Garcia, you're muted. Unmute yourself, Frank.
Okay, there we go. So I move to rise from closed session.
No. No.
No.
So to adopt the resolution.
Oh, okay, so we go down to resolution,
Yeah,
okay. Okay, well, in that case, I move that the board approve the resolution regarding the item of Explorers Trail Eastman resolution with the findings of fact and authorization and directions therein.
Support.
Been moved and supported. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Holfleur,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg. Mr. Dannenberg, you're on mute.
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next thing on the agenda is report of county administrator.
Yes, first let me say thank you. I think that this is, it was important to do this today. I think that it helps to build our resiliency as an organization, knowing that we can pull this off. And, you know, there are a lot of big items on the agenda today, and we actually had a closed session mixed in. And so I think it went very well. And we thank you for doing this. I think it was as much an experiment and an organizational building activity as it is a response to COVID. And we know we can do it now. And so we thank you for that. Also, I'd also like to add my thank you to Karen in Fiscal Services, Myra with our county audit, and Keith with the CMH audit. I think it just shows the strength, just one of many indications of the strength of Ottawa County, that we do have that type of performance on such an important function, which truly is the main measure of our accountability, both in terms between staff and the board, as far as how the money is managed, and also back to our citizens as far as how we're doing as a county. It's also an extremely important tool that's used with the rating agencies as far as indicating our fiscal health. And I should mention that Karen and I do have a conference call with Moody's tomorrow to discuss county finances for the ratings for upcoming bonds. So very important. Also, I just wanted to mention that when COVID first hit and we first sent people home to work, you know, again, it's a great indication of the performance of Ottawa County. Our IT department was very resilient by setting up over 300 VPNs so that people could work from home. And we preferred this approach because, you know, there were other governments that sent people home and said, just be on call. But we sent people home and very much wanted to continue our county operations. And I'll be putting some stats out in a digest that we should hit send on late today, and then we'll send more updates on stats. But as far as at-home training is concerned, it's almost been overwhelming how employees have responded. So through today, we've had Ottawa County has hosted 9 different courses with 201 participants. We purchased the Knowledge City training app that has over 14,000 training programs, video learning associated with it. And so far we've had 54 different courses accessed by our employees with 210 participants. We've also offered some Ottawa County custom e-learning courses, 10 different courses with 17 participants. Our EAP provider, Pine Rest, has offered some additional trainings during this time. We've had 8 different trainings accessed and 367 participants. So that's a total of 81 different courses with 795 participants. So I think that speaks huge of our employees. I've always characterized this as a learning organization, that people want to learn more and they're willing to put in the time to do it. We wanted to offer these online training opportunities as a way to shore up people's schedules should they not have as much to do at home, or maybe to fill in the cracks. And I think the response of employees has been overwhelming. I should also say, even though I don't have a lot of data, and this is, I hope to get more very soon and get it out, just the work that's being done from home, I think is amazing. So our clerk register has been telling me, I think in March alone, our court records division handled over 10,000 records. And then also we have just looking at deeds. I'm just looking at 2 of dozens of county services, but we've had 3,577 deeds recorded just between April 1 and April 27. And I think it's just amazing the work that's being accomplished from home. And that speaks to revenue too. We have Karen, Charla, the treasurer's office are all working to kind of track what's happening with county revenue. We will be down in revenue in some areas, and also county expenditures. You know, what's the picture there? But certainly when we can process over 3,500 deeds from home, there are fees associated with that. So it's nice to be able to be in a position to keep that revenue rolling in while we're working remotely. We are starting the budget process. At this point, we are asking offices of courts, departments to treat budget requests as normal. It's easier to work backwards as far as financial reality goes than to, at this point, not having the full picture, ask people to somehow amend those requests. And so the budget process has started, and we are proceeding as normal with that, knowing that as we move towards a recommended budget, there may need to be some alterations to that. We are still having, 3 times a week, Nick Bonstell, our emergency management coordinator, is having the 8 a.m. updates. And then of course our health department's doing updates each day, right around 4:30 on Facebook Live. And then we have a meeting that occurs each Monday of a team of, it's probably approaching 20 now, just to make sure we're in touch and we're updated. And that group is also starting to discuss recovery. What does that look like for Ottawa County? What kind of schedule will people come back? You know, will the county provide masks? What other social distancing will need to be observed? What's our prognosis for what that looks like? So we're starting to have those discussions as well. So I think that's it for today.
Okay, any comments or questions for Al?
You know, Al, I do have a question. Have we received any concerns from our customer service folks? I mean, or members in our community as to areas where we could possibly improve in the future in case we run into something like this again?
I'm not aware of any, and I'm looking at Regina right now, who would be the focal point for that, and it looks like she's not aware of any either. But certainly we're eager to hear those if people have those comments to forward to us.
Well, that's great.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I wanted to give a shout out for Christina from the Health Department. That's something I look forward to watching every day at 4:30. And Judge Judy has definitely gotten booted. I watched that report from Christina. The other thing was, I know that we have our strategic planning session coming up. I don't know if that's something that, you know, is still out there a little bit in our date. Have we thought about that at all, how that may roll?
Yeah, it's something we're keeping top of mind. I think that we'll have to be flexible, and maybe we'll even work on a backup date. But I think at this point, I think that's what, late in May? June. Oh, it's June. So, right, I think it's fair to say that that's something that could be a victim to COVID-19, but at this point, I think we'll leave it on the calendar. And Matt, thanks for that comment. I think we'll work on a backup date just in case.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Yesterday, we had a executive meeting MAC did with Senator Stamas. And we had a bunch of questions. We asked him some about federal money and state money. And we asked him where they were going to find some of their money. And he definitely said that that county revenue coming from the state is going to be down. They are going to take some of that money, our revenue sharing. He made it perfectly clear that the state is going to take some of the revenue sharing from the counties. So something we have to keep in mind.
Yep. So Al, you know, some of the costs that we've incurred with some of the software that we've gotten for additional training and actually for Nick's office as well. Some of those costs are going to be covered by that federal money that's allocated for COVID, correct?
We believe so, yes. The state will have a COVID allocation that we will use out of the health department to pay for some of these things. And then Nick will also be applying for monies as well.
Good. Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, just real quick, Mr. Chair. So kind of piggyback on what Matt said, I think, you know, health communications and GIS have done a great job. The evening email that they send out to everybody who's on the listserv is great. It's super detailed and kind of giving a, you know, good look what the county's doing, and residents putting up their Instagram posts, what they're doing about staying home. So I think that, you know, for my part, and I think a lot of folks who, you know, reached out to me said that that's a really good resource for Ottawa County residents.
Good. Yes, Mr. DeYoung.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Al, for talking about all the department heads today. That's so important and encouraging to hear the kind of people that we have. My encouragement for our board today is to take a minute out and send out an email or an email message or a telephone call to some of these department heads and let them know with sincerity how important they are to us and how important they are to Ottawa County.
Good reminder, Greg. Anyone else? Yes.
Mr. Chair, to piggyback on what Greg said, I don't know if anybody was on the call the other day with the commissioners around the country with the COVID task force team when the special guest appeared on the phone call. And it was the President of the United States who came to thank the commissioners and township officials and tribal leaders who were on the call. And I thought that was, again, that kind of piggybacks on what Greg said, where, I mean, even the president took time out for that just to say thank you. And it was a surprise. Nobody knew he was going to be on the call. So
good. Right.
Just one more thing, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank Robin for the email about the race and power of illusion, the 3 videos. I've gotten through 2 of them already, but I look forward to our discussion on that.
Good. All right, next thing is general information, comments, and meetings attended. We haven't had too many meetings other than online. So anyone have any comments? Okay, I just have one, and that is that I've attended these MAC online webinars, and they've all been excellent. I think there's another one that's coming on Wednesday. And if you get a chance to sign up for those, and Phil, if you would just pass along our appreciation for what MAC has done in light of the fact that they had to cancel the legislative forum or conference itself, but then to come back with some of these speakers, they did a great job with that. So thanks.
Yep, I did tell him that already, Raj, so thank you for the comment.
Okay, good. All right. If there's nothing else, we need public comment. Justin, are there any public comments that came through?
No, sir.
All right, then we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second. Okay, it's been moved in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. We're adjourned. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you, Raj.
Thanks, Roger. Good job.
Thank you.
be safe, everyone. Take care.